All right, this next one comes in from Devon C. Email titled, I am an Odunze bro, down bad. Hey, Yahoo Fantasy crew, this question is for fellow Odunze truther Matt Harmon. Odunze started the season red hot, but has been ice cold since the Bears' Week 5 bye. Is this a cause for concern, or do you think these bad performances were merely situational? One more bad week in a row, and I might end up smoking some cigarettes. Okay, well, hey, Devin, don't be smoking any cigarettes, all right? This is a smoke-free pod. I mean, you live your life, you make your choices, but please don't let this hobby drive you to smoking cigs, all right? Let's just get that off the rip. That being said, Boone, what is your level of concern for Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze?
I mean, sir, this question was addressed to you. This question was to fellow Odunze truther Matt Harmon. I think you're the one that should be giving your level of panic here, not me.
I'm sorry. Are you not a host on this podcast? Are you not somebody that? Are you not? Listen,
I'm just trying to be true to this person who wrote in. Devin clearly wanted your take on this.
I'm ready to rock on the show. I got a great
All
night's
right.
sleep.
Fair enough.
Buy me some time
need that
here.
Quick break. You were ready to catch a breather there. All right, I'm going to say some panic. But almost like some panic, close to no panic. The targets have been down. Yeah, the playing time is still high. He's a full-time player in this offense. I think what might be happening is he might be getting a little more attention from defenses than he was at the start of the season when he came out and definitely looked like the number one guy and potentially like a fantasy wide receiver one. And then coming out of the bye, we're seeing him not produce in the same way. I mean, Caleb's part of the problem for sure. I don't think Caleb Williams is necessarily playing that great right now. We're still seeing him kind of have his ups and downs along the way as he gets comfortable in that Ben Johnson offense. But here's the thing, Harmon. Here's what's keeping me at just some panic, kind of on the verge of no panic, and that's help is on the way in the form of the Ravens defense, the Bengals defense, and the Giants defenses. Those are the next three matchups here. The Ravens and the Giants, they're top 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. We know the Bengals are also a plus matchup. So I think Odunze is going to get right in those contests. I'm not that worried about him. Of course, we believe in the talent. I think this is just what often happens with any receiver, even the good ones. You have some down games, and when they happen next to each other, people start to panic a little bit and was something wrong, but that's just the nature of the receiver position. Not that I need to be telling you that, but there are going to be down games. We talked about at the beginning of the season, right? If a player comes out, even a star player, and has a couple bad games to start the season, people act like they're never going to have a good game again. But if you would split those bad games up for, week 2 and week 15, you wouldn't really think twice. So the fact that he's had a couple down games recently, I think that's why we're a little more worried. But do not do anything drastic. Do not freak out and trade Odunze. This guy is a good player. He's a good fantasy asset. And I'm some panic to almost no panic.
Yeah. See, I couldn't have said that any better than myself. I couldn't have said that any better myself. Devin didn't need me. Nobody needed me. You said that perfectly. And yeah, right now, Rome Odunze is wide receiver 12 in points per game because I believe Rashee Rice is number 1 after playing just one contest, which of course he is.
Amazing.
Just
so good.
There's obviously we're taping this before Monday Night Football as well, so some guys could bump him up. But so Rome Odunze is wide receiver 12 in points per game right now, 12.98, and that's way more than you thought when you were drafting him. Like, again, that's where I want to say, like, expectations here. I think that's another thing when guys come out and they have that bad game to start the season, we're like, oh my God, he's never going to have a good game again. And then I think on the inverse of that, when a guy comes out and we put the stats up from our handle earlier, the first few weeks of the season, he's just hitting every single week. It's, he's never going to have a bad game again. But like you said, this position, it goes up and down. Ben Johnson actually literally did that up and down motion when asked about the passing game after this week 7 win against the New Orleans Saints, where, it's been very up and down so far. And he said the run game's been awesome. The run game has literally been the best run game in the league these last 2 weeks since they've got off the bye, which you can tell that was what Johnson really focused in on the bye, was getting that run game going. They're first in yards per game. They're just first in a bunch of different metrics these last 2 weeks. So the passing game is still a bit of a work in progress. Also wanted to share this. JJ Zacharyson sent me this today, that in weeks 1 to 2, Odunze had an 83% catchable target rate. Weeks 3 to 6, 45%, and 33% in this last game. I'm interested how that got the 33% got charted, just because I watched that game and there are definitely plays left on the field 100%. And I think, there's a couple where like Rome gets his hands on it. There's interference by the defender. He maybe could have brought it in. So just like interesting in how that's actually charted. But there's some plays where Caleb gets flushed from the pocket because of the blitz, and then where Odunze's open downfield and he's the primary read, that play doesn't get made. So I'm with you. I think it's only some panic, because you should expect some volatility. Also, let's make sure to include that if that stupid touchdown didn't get called back the game against Washington for that illegal formation or whatever it was, we're definitely not having this conversation. So yeah, to me, I think these slow games are going to happen, especially when you're running the ball really well. So I'm only barely at some panic here on Rome.
Yeah, and I agree, and I don't know if there's that much more to say about it other than the fact that we hope this offense only continues to get better, that Caleb gets more comfortable in it, and we always expected there were going to be ups and downs, and that as the season went along, this whole unit was going to improve. And hey, like you mentioned, that run game looked incredible this week. Harmon and Yahoo, not to spoil the waiver wire section a little later, but he is one of the top pickups this week for sure. So let's just hope that things continue in the right direction. Everybody continues to get a little more comfortable. Ben Johnson keeps scheming the heck out of it. And by the end of the season, the second half of the year, we get the best results possible as people are competing to try to make the fantasy playoffs and to try to win a fantasy title.
All right, let's stick on second-year receiver island here. Gabe A sends in, love the show. Again, whenever you can just say love the show, we're definitely keeping your email on the show. I had hoped that during Rice's 6-week suspension, Xavier Worthy would get a chance to cement himself as wide receiver 1 and keep up a good share of volume even once Rice got back. However, Travis Kelce smashing him in week 1 basically ended that dream. And now I have a wide receiver who I think has the most real life upside, but basically gets the same work as Juju and Hollywood. Panic time. What's the level of concern? I just mentioned Rashee Rice leads the position in points per game after 1 week and averaging 0.8 air yards per target. Classic Rashee Rice stuff. So that's where the Rashee Rice thing is. Where are we at with Xavier Worthy after 1 game with Rice?
I think it has to be total panic, and I don't even know that it's his fault. I don't think he's healthy. Like, I don't think he's 100% going back to that injury earlier in the season. I think maybe he even did the Chiefs a favor by getting back out there when he did. I still think there's a big time risk that he could get injured again, that he could miss time. And yeah, I mean, going back to this game this week for the Chiefs, this is not the one to judge their offense on, how they deployed guys, the usage. This is not the game to look at that, because they had complete control. Anytime that you're kneeling with like 3 minutes left in the game, that's not a game that you're going to look at and kind of pull away stats from and really make a case off of. And yet, like, what we expected before the year was that, like the email says, that we were going to get Worthy kind of producing as a wide receiver 1 for the stretch until Rice came back. And then what was that going to do to his value? Push him down to wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 levels. It didn't happen because of that injury, and it's unfortunate. You didn't get that value that you were hoping for early in the season, but now that Rice is back, it's not going to happen. I totally agree with the email that you look at Worthy as somebody that's value. It's a lot closer to Hollywood Brown, which is insane. You never would have thought that before the year. But again, I go back to, I just don't think this guy is 100%. I don't think he looks like the player that we expected him to be, and really the player that he looked like last year at times. Tell me if I'm wrong about that, Harmon, because I'm talking to the receiver guy. You're going to be able to talk to that more than I am. But to me, you look at this offense and you see that Rice is the man, and he came back and was immediately the guy. Didn't even play a ton of snaps and was still getting peppered with targets, was still making plays. They were treating him like he was Jerry Rice out there. I think fantasy managers can expect some huge days the rest of the season. It could only improve potentially from here once he gets back to playing, closer to full-time snaps. But that's bad news for Worthy, who is just now this like boomer bust wide receiver 3, where he'll have weeks where he's the guy and he finds the end zone like Hollywood Brown did this week, but you're not going to get consistent numbers from him at all. And I just don't think he has that ceiling anymore that you thought he was going to have for the first 6 weeks of the year when Rice was out, and it all just boils back down to that injury.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there, and I think you hit the nail on the head where he's going to be like a boom bust wide receiver 3. So if you were expecting more than that, I think this would be a total panic thing. For me, I would only argue some panic just because this is kind of what I expected from Worthy, where
fair.
And this goes back to receiver archetypes, right? Where, not to get too dorky about this here, but I mean, come on. What, you don't want to get wide receiver archetype dorky? What do you listen to this show for? I think when you look at these two guys, like in the archetype of player that Xavier Worthy is versus the archetype of player that Rashee Rice is always going to be easier to get the football to. And look, we saw that in this game. I mean, I watched that game back, charted Rashee Rice in that game, and it's just laughable, like some of the stuff that they do with him where he's just got so much space underneath. By the way, he looks great. No worries about the injury at this point. And like we're showing the route chart here, which is an incomplete view of the player because it's only the targeted stuff here. But again, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's the route. It's not even, I joked with James Coe about this earlier. It's not even a route shrub anymore. Like it's not the route tree. It's not the route shrub. It's like a lawn that has not been mowed recently. Like the HOA is sending you a notice like, hey buddy, you need to cut your grass, pal, because this thing is way too long, but it's not quite a shrub. That's where Rashee Rice's route tree was in his first game back, which it's going to expand as he goes on, as he plays more, of course. But again, it's always going to be easier to get the football to Rashee Rice than it is for Xavier Worthy. And then that's not on, in addition to that, Boone, I think Rice is further along in his development of that archetype than Xavier Worthy is as that like deep threat perimeter archetype. So Worthy's working against 2 points there to be a high volume player. That's not to say that he won't have weeks. And I think he's actually looked, I would say he looked good in the first game back before he picked up that ankle injury, which I think might be bugging him a little bit.
Right.
So there's a lot working against Worthy to being a high volume player. Not that he won't have weeks, but I think expecting him to be a consistent wide receiver 2 that you plug into your matchups and 70% of the time you just forget it. I think that's maybe not going to happen here for him.
So then from a fantasy standpoint, because I always want to give like actionable advice, right? I would be trying to trade him because I do think he's got a cool name. He's had big games before. People know him. You wouldn't be able, I don't think, to get very much if you just trade him straight up, but I would package him with another player and try to upgrade somewhere else on your roster. But I would be trying to move off him if you can before it becomes even more clear that Rashee Rice is the guy and that Worthy's just going to be this like really inconsistent boomer bust wide receiver 3.
And maybe you try to do that here after week 8 when they play Washington, because that's a secondary that's giving it up to some of these players. So maybe he has that big week. You wait one more week, you start him this week, potentially try to chase a big one, and then maybe you cash it in before a week 9 game in Buffalo, a week 10 bye, a week 11 game against the Denver Broncos. So there's definitely some spots here where, like, Worthy's, again, he's going to have big weeks. But see, Boone, this is why we work well together. I can do all this, dorky receiver archetype stuff, and then you can come in here and say, like, yeah, here's the actionable takeaway. We asked the chat, who would you rather have rest of the season, Rashee Rice or Rome Odunze? Rashee Rice ran away with it here, 92%. And look, I'm the biggest Rome Odunze bro you're going to find, and I would agree that from a fantasy standpoint, I would rather have Rashee Rice the rest of the season. There's pretty little doubt to me on that one, unless you got any arguments to that. I think it's
I was going to say, how many receivers would you actually take over Rashee Rice at this point? That would be interesting to me. Like, there's not that many, like maybe 5 or 6. Like, I haven't done my rest of season trade value charts yet for this week. I haven't done the update, but I feel like Rashee Rice is going to be top 7. Like, I don't think he's going to be much lower than that.
Yeah, just looking at like top receivers, points per game right now. Puka, tough to say because he's currently injured, but I still would rather have Puka, JSN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. Like, yeah, I'd rather have those guys. Then yeah, you get into, you definitely, that's what the territory you get into. Like, next is obviously Igbuka, Pickens, Addison is up there, Quentin Johnson, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Rome Odunze, Justin Jefferson's like wide receiver 50. I think, yeah, that's the bucket of players that Rashee Rice would be in right now because he's just so good against zone coverage, and he's just open because he runs that little route tree, and if he ever expands his game at all, then he's really going to take off. And I still have some hope that he could do that here in the next few weeks, but that's something that bears watching here. All right, we've got one more to get to before we go to break here, and we'll be a little quicker on this one. Kyle D sends in an email titled Devontae's Inferno, which incredible title, well done. Not going to read all this just because it was a lot, and like I said, we got to get to break here, but long story short of it is just kind of Kyle gives his thoughts on Davante Adams. Everything you could ask for out of your wide receiver 2, the dynamic duo of Puka Nacua and number 17 has been fun to watch this year. However, important to note that Adams only had 5 catches and produced a nice fantasy day because of the ridiculous end zone chemistry with Stafford, who's aging like fine wine in 2025. His question is generally, should fantasy managers be comfortable starting Adams as a wide receiver 2 with Puka once he's back healthy, with the Rams coming off the bye, or are you more inclined for the Cortland Sutton, Lad McConkey types of the world? What say you, Justin Boone?
I mean, first of all, shout out to Kyle, out of Vancouver, Canada. Love it. Love all the Canadian football fans. It's awesome. Coming out of Canada myself, I love to see that. I don't have any panic on Davante Adams. And I want to say all the nice stuff about Kyle because I don't totally understand this question, right? Like, of course, 3 touchdowns on 5 catches is just insane efficiency. But when you look at his outlook, like he has been crushing it so far. Like, what more would you want out of Davante Adams? At least 50 yards and or a touchdown in every single game but one. He scored a touchdown in 4 of his 7 outings so far. I still see him as a low-end wide receiver 1 right now for fantasy, and we don't know when Puka's going to be back for sure. So I would take him over all those other names that were mentioned there by Kyle. I think he is still a great pick, even though he's not technically the number 1 receiver on his team. We have seen teammates both finish as top 12 fantasy receivers before. I think this duo is going to do it again as long as Stafford stays healthy. Yeah. Stafford is dealing it right now. And Davante Adams, we know what he can do in terms of touchdowns. It's great to see him doing it. Sure, the yardage hasn't been up there over 100 yards every week, but who cares? You do not need that from him when he's producing this way. So, no, I would not be moving on from Davante Adams or cashing in high for those other names. I would be riding this out. I think you are lucky that you have him on your team.
Yeah, I get it because he hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games, and in 2 of those games he was below 8 half PPR points. So I understand that is the floor, and those games might happen here. But the Rams quite literally brought Davante Adams into town to score touchdowns. Like, this is the role that they wanted to have him, and they need answers in the red zone. I don't know if you saw the cool clip from Puka during that Ravens game where he was really hammering these guys. Like, we need to earn the right to dance. Yeah. Like, that whole thing. So they know they need to get better in the red zone. They brought this guy in here to score touchdowns in the red zone. So no, I'm not concerned at all. No panic from me for Davante Adams, and I would definitely rather have him than the Lad McConkeys or the Cortland Suttons of the world. He's going to continue to score a bunch of touchdowns with this Rams team.